Hello and welcome to the Echo Chamber podcast. My name is Tony Groves and today we're talking political correspondent incorrectness. I think that's the term we're going to use, Martin, is it?
Yes, incorrectness.
As always, I'm joined by my co-host and the man who just passed his NCT, folks. He's been given another few months.
Yeah. I have another few months now before I have to go back in.
Well, my immediate reaction there was, he said, got the results from Beaumont. It's all okay. And I said, Martin, that does nothing for the ratings of the podcast. Seriously, like, what are we going to...
There was a great line out of the hospital today, and it was, you're a success story. If you died tomorrow, you're still a success story.
That's reassuring, isn't it? Don't worry about dying, you're going to be remembered well.
Listen, more importantly, we're delighted to be joining. You've just heard his voice there, the Tortoise Shack, by Group Political Correspondent for Communicorp, News Talk 98 FM, and every other radio station in Ireland, bar one or two. There's a couple others that he's not involved in. Sean Defoe. Sean, thank you so much for coming on the podcast.
Thanks for being, guys. All of them not named RTE is how I tend to try and describe it, because it's just easier than saying, all the different ones that
except
come into
RTE.
the group.
For the time being.
They pay
walking into that.
They pay paradise. No. Listen, we've been talking away on Twitter for a while, and we were talking about getting this done, and you were in the midst of the referendum and the throes of what was actually obviously a huge social and political change in the country. But it brings me to what I want to begin with. There was obviously a kickback. I thought after the result, they said, no one saw this coming. And then the other kickback was, anybody in the Leinster House Bubble didn't see it coming. What do you believe the Leinster House Bubble is a real thing? Or?
100% believe it's a real thing. And before I got this job, when I was just kind of a general reporter, I think I probably saw it more clearly. It's one of these things you just fall into, because like with any organisation, you're working in the same place, you're working around the same people. In this case, it happens to be other hacks and politicians.
Yeah.
So when you go into any organisation, you fall into the throes of that particular organisation. And even though you are competing with some people and trying to get stories off other people, it is there. And it's become harder for me to see, which is worrying, which probably means I'm becoming part of it, which is a terrifying thought.
Institutional.
Captured.
But pushing back wildly. I 100% do think it is a thing, and it's something you do have to, like, after the referendum, I took a week off and deleted Twitter, left all of the work WhatsApp groups, not muted them, just left them, got out and didn't look at news for a week. And it's great to then come back to it, because you just have a bit of a fresh perspective. And when you're at a press conference and everyone is there beforehand saying, well, what are we going to ask? What are we going to ask? And you're kind of thinking of things a little bit differently. Again, you can kind of feel that pullback from the bubble. So I think it is there. I think when you say with the referendum, no one predicted the result that it was going to be. There was, and it's one of the weird quirks of the bubble, in that in the week beforehand, lots of us were saying, like, it's going to pass. There's definitely a huge swing towards yes. But almost counterintuitively, I then felt, well, I must know I'm inside the Dublin bubble. So maybe I'm only seeing yes in Dublin and I'm not seeing it outside.
Yeah.
And it was one of the arguments I was kind of having with our place. We need to get outside of Dublin more, and we need to be down there. And I went to a few places around the country, but didn't get out as much as I would have liked. And that was, partly due to there was the cervical check scandal in the meantime, so you had to be in and around that. There was other things going on, and also we only had a certain amount of showtime to fill, and largely between debates on different shows and between reports, there wasn't the huge space to do that.
Like we were laughing, and I mean this with the greatest respect to the other people. There were some fantastic podcasts that sprung up around the 8th, Don't Stop Repeal, and you just thought this was their market in terms of, and this was their moment. And we were talking about people going, are you going to do much on repeal? And we were very conscious of just two lads in a room going, I don't really want to be the people. Like, we were supporting and active and very much on the side of the Yes campaign, but we were looking at it going, people are only going to, as you said, there's only limited time for people to listen to things, and these debates, and some of the debates were quite, when you said the last week, I think no one did better for the Yes campaign than the No campaign. I think they imploded.
I think there was a poor last week from them, and even in the case of we were there planning in the last few mornings, thinking, okay, right, well, there's 3 Yes events on today. Where are the No events? And there was a couple of days where there just wasn't, or they were very quiet, or maybe because there was the one organisation together for Yes going for one side, and the other two were Love Both and Save the 8 that weren't seemingly communicating fully with each other. There wasn't really that same pushback to them, but no, they obviously didn't get any sort of a handle in the final week, and by then it was probably gone anyway.
Yeah.
And the pollsters, oh my God, the pollsters were so far wrong.
Well, it's another example. If we didn't get the lesson from Brexit, if we didn't get it from Trump, don't trust the polls.
Yeah, well, I think, and increasingly people, we've always known about polls, people like pollsters. We've always known that. And I think increasingly people are more cynical about polls, and they just...
If that was true, though, then why was the exit poll spot on?
I think it's probably the larger sample. And
yeah, that was it's a good point.
With the exit polls as well, it's kind of a different mood because they're getting people who come out of the polling stations. They've made their decision and they've done it.
Yeah.
And it's not a case of, I'm worried what Johnny down the road will think. Or like when I went to Athlone, I was talking to a couple of businesses who said that they were afraid to express any sort of view because they thought they might lose business. And just because they didn't know what their neighbours thought or didn't know what whoever. Whereas when you've done it and you're in the booth, you're like, okay, right, it's done. And you might be a bit more honest maybe.
I saw some of that actually on Twitter where you have people who are social media influencers for business, and the advice they were giving is don't say anything. And I was thinking, well, okay, you can play it safe, or you can nail your colours to the mast. Do businesses need to be that careful about their political opinions? It would have helped some businesses to come out and say, yeah, we're very much pro-repeal. And then, the way the result worked out...
Yeah, it's a weird one. It's one I think you got in previous podcasts. I think it was the Oliver Callan one where you see it with broadcasters and they say one wrong thing. You see they're gone from the show or they lose a sponsor or whatever, and people are kind of very afraid of that. So when these guys and these influencers, it's such a strange industry where they're very reliant on one or two sponsors who keep them going. You give them the car or give them whatever. And it's probably easier to just play it safe and say nothing rather than, try to champion a cause and potentially go and lose a lot.
And
I see what you mean about that.
But Ireland is very small like that, Martin, as well. You're not talking about, if you were to pick a cohort of 33% of the population, is that going to be enough to sustain a particular industry if you were in a certain, because we do know that, like we do know, you've seen it where they make a mistake, and in Ireland we're not very forgiving. You don't come back, lad does something in the States and he can go on Oprah and say
become president.
Yeah.
Well, actually, that's something that ties into politics and something we've seen in politics here, that if a TD or an elected official does actually fall on their sword, there's no comeback for them. The last thing a TD needs to do in this country is fall on their sword. You are better off deny the whole way, because the guy who does stand up and is honest gets no kudos for it whatsoever.
Yeah.
And I think Trevor Sargent was the last person who actually held up a hand and went, well, actually, I did wrong. I resign. And that was the end of him in politics.
Well, what Trevor said was he wouldn't go into power. He wouldn't do a deal. And then when the party did the deal, he was part of the infrastructure, the program for government. And then he said, and now I must actually honour what I said.
That's right. Yeah.
And he stepped away. Well, when yet we see it in Amber Rudd, where Amber Rudd was in an email chain and stepped down, and we had people here who were in email chains and said, "I never saw the emails."
Well, Frances Jones is probably a good example of it, because she did go in the end after all the pressure, and I didn't see it or whatever, and did it to avoid an election. Is the only reason she really went. But since then, through disclosures and through everything, there hasn't been a big finding against her. Do you know what I mean? There is, in her own mind. I'm sure she's saying, well, there must be some way back, but at that nature of Irish politics, there isn't. There's a block.
Yeah, well, we've seen that with Alan Shatter, and we have seen that.
Oh, yeah, but Alan's been great, because Alan has decided now that he knows he's outside, so he's going to kick everybody in the shin as they're walking by.
I expect Alan to take an unfair dismissals case one of these days and look for reinstatement. I absolutely do.
You'll represent him.
Oh, that'd be a brilliant story. That'd keep me entertained for weeks.
He'll at least get an erotic book out of it.
But it does show when a politician here actually stands on honour and does the right thing, they are unelectable after that. They're simply unelectable after that. Whereas the shyster guy who does awful things keeps getting elected, and keeps getting elected, no matter what findings in what tribunals come forward.
Yeah, it's just a strange attitude, I suppose, we have towards our politicians, and even looking back on them. Look at Bertie, and there's still talk of Bertie for president, and if he went, he'd get a good vote. He
oh
would.
God, I hope not. And now I'm looking
would.
at your two faces, and I'm just hoping to God that there's enough people out there that said, no, don't vote for Bertie.
I'm telling you, 7 years' time, Bertie versus Ender for the presidency.
Now listen, now hang on a sec. All of a sudden, I'm conflicted.
It all depends whether President Adams is going to hand that up.
Oh, there's the dark horse I hadn't thought about. Yeah. Oh, wow.
But you're probably right. And actually, I thought with Brexit, I thought the way we've handled Brexit, wouldn't it have been great to pick 3 representatives, Bertie, Enda and Jerry, and send them over? They're your 3 representatives. They're the 3 guys. They'll speak for all of Ireland. As I don't think you could get a better consensus of opinion. You'd have Jerry keeping the other 2 straight. You'd have Bertie able to do all the talking, and then you'd have Enda doing all the palm shaking. I think it would work out really well. They confuse the shit out of everything.
Like the Avengers of Brexit, when it all comes together, and then it gets the Thanos of Theresa May.
Theresa May clicks her fingers, and half the country disappears.
Yeah, well, that's what she's doing, isn't it? The European Union could disappear.
Well, look, it's an interesting point, because you're in there and you're seeing, because people keep saying that, maybe we're not seeing what the government are doing behind the scenes, because there is an actual, people are starting to realise, and it's starting to permeate now into the wider world, that we can't keep on this waiting till April Fool's Day next year, because that's what it's because the Brits are thinking we actually will do that. Because when it comes down to it, it's Ireland's little border at 2% of the EU's economy versus us and one of the EU's largest trading partners. And we don't want to be the ones that are going to be held accountable at the end of this. So at some stage, the mood music has to almost, whether it has to change or improve, or we have to play a different tune. I think there has to be some sort of, I'm hoping there's some sort of other negotiations happening in the background that we're not privy to.
Well,
you don't look so.
Let me be cynically sceptical and say no, there isn't.
I'd be more inclined to believe that. I think there's probably other talks in the background that are maybe more serious. You would hope there's other talks in the background that are more serious, but I think with Brexit, no one has a clue. I don't think anyone has a clue what's going to happen. I don't think the Brits have a notion what they want, and they can't decide between the different factions in the Conservatives and in other parts of the country. And I think everyone else, you see all these headlines and you see, it might be October now, it was meant to be June and all this. But no one has a notion what anyone wants in it.
Yeah.
So it's going to come down to the last minute simply by virtue of it's such a mess up that no one can get a proper answer.
Well, a lot of decisions in general are made because it's 5:00 on a Friday evening. That is why a lot of decisions are made. So
but usually the decision at 5:00 on a Friday evening, leave it till Monday and let's go to the pub.
Which might not work in one of the biggest decisions of political history. But look, nothing would surprise me anymore when it comes to Brexit.
Yeah, it's going to be interesting. I see the Scottish are looking for another independence vote. That's coming down the line. And we've been talking a bit here about Northern Ireland, and I think that a border poll is much closer now than it has been for a long, long time. I think.
No, the border poll is closer now than it's ever been in history, Martin. That's undoubted. Even if Martin thinks it's quick, I think it could be 4 or 5 years, but I think that is quick.
I still think, well, that would be quick in political. I still think it is a ways down the line, and I think the Scottish independence one should. I think if they were to be a bit more smart about it, perhaps they would leave it a little while and leave a little gap between Brexit, because I think them leaving the UK, leaving the EU, is going to be the end of that association of countries. It's something that's been probably coming for years and years and years, but once it does happen, there will, I believe anyway, eventually there will be a United Ireland, that vote will happen, and Scotland will vote again, and after the way they got screwed the first time, they're probably likely to leave as well. So then you're left with England and Wales, and England will probably go, we don't want Wales anyway, goodbye to you.
There's an argument for that, because it's always that awful trope that when you set out to secure your, it was make America great again, but it was make Britain great again, literally Great Britain. You've set out on a path,
Britain though, isn't it?
But you've set out on a path that almost, hurt the union. And that's what, like, because there's no winners here, economically, socially. People are just going to suffer in the long run. I can't remember who it was in the UK said what they told us was, you're living in your house now, but you can move to a new house and it's lovely. And then you sold your house, and then they said, oh, actually the new house isn't anyway good, and you can't move back to your old house because we've sold it. And now we're all sitting there going, but I don't want to move. Yeah. And they kind of are left in that limbo. But it's not just them. It's going to be us. It's going to be even the EU, because unfortunately,
on past
economics matters.
Going on, past performance is the best indicator of future behaviour. Or past behaviour is the best indicator of future performance. Ireland doesn't come out well in the EU in recent years with the banking debt crisis. We haven't come out well. And why anybody thinks that we come out any better out of Brexit kind of defeats me. Why would the EU invest so much in Ireland? I don't mean money-wise, but invest so much of Brexit in Ireland when it's much easier to say, well, you got a border Ireland, screw you.
Yeah. I don't know. I was of that thought when it all started, and I thought we're going to get absolutely screwed here. The mood music really has been so much behind Ireland, though. Do you know what I mean? There's been so much of it that they're saying we are going to back them up, and I don't at the moment, and this maybe is me being a bit naive, I don't get the sense that we are going to get screwed by the other EU countries, and I hope that won't be the case. Ireland is their success story in so many ways, in that we were this little tin pot backward country that they toss a load of money into that's now a net contributor towards the EU. We were a tin pot. Well, maybe we are still a tin pot country, but we're a slightly richer tin pot little country.
Yeah, well, it has worked for us in that sense.
Yeah, it has in that sense. And again, with the even with the banking debt, I mean, of the pigs as they were, we were the ones to get back on track and to start to put things right better than some of those other economies. So in so many ways, we're their little golden boys.
Interesting though, how that, and this gets to another thing when we say that we were the success story, the poster child for austerity. Okay, was one of the phrases that we've had thrown around. The poster child for austerity. We know that that's created huge social crises that don't tally with the fastest growing economy in the EU. We can't be the fastest growing economy in the EU and everything be great in GDP terms yet. In an 87% rise in homelessness in the last since the last government came in, since not even Leo, so it's 2 years, in 2 years we've an 87% raise. So, and it's a multiple of that if you take it over the lifetime of the crisis. And then you put that into context and you say, well, what we saw today was a report came out and it said that Ireland is the biggest corporate tax haven in the world. Now, I've been saying this on mic and on print for a couple of years that we are, and the OECD confirmed it a couple of years ago where they actually said we were the top rated, most transparent tax haven in the world. And that was in the OECD report. And I remember at the time when that report came out, Pascal got ahead of the story and stood in front of the Pol Cors and said, great news, we've gotten a green rating for tax transparency. Yeah. And I said, no, if you read down what it means is we're the best tax haven. And again today I saw the Irish Times said, Minister for Finance denies recent report. And I go, oh God, lads, can we just actually call it as it is and actually call it out? And that would be one concern I have, that you have a pool of political correspondents, people who are working with the Minister for Finance or whatever those corridors of power are, and they do just deliver the press briefing.
Deliver the line, yeah. It's probably one of the weaknesses, I think, of the Irish press in many ways, in that, and there's a lot of factors that contribute into it. Like I can talk from my own point of view in that the political staff is me. There is just me in our place, and that's the way it's been now for nearly a year since there were big changes and unfortunately job cuts in our organisation. So you're just, in many ways, you're covering maybe 5, 6, 7 stories in a day, but it's not that you're writing the story once. With radio, you have a 2-hour turnaround. So, for example, this morning I was actually started on tax stuff. I started on the PAC report, which was mad in itself, to show that 8 of the top 100 corporate tax paying companies in Ireland paid no tax at all. 0%. Yeah. Absolutely zero. And then 13 of them paid less than 1%. I think the average was 8% or something like that of the top 100, which is bonkers to even think about. But that story had to be reproduced 4 times throughout the day, and on top of a cervical check on a couple of others, on Minister Murphy's rant in the Dáil, on all these different bits. So when you're in that situation, unfortunately, there isn't the time to go a bit more in depth. Now, there's a difference between that and actually reading the full press release that comes along and deciding, okay, here's the top line, here's what you want, here's what the government rather wants you to see, but down the very bottom of it is probably where the news angle is, or on page 15 of the report, or whatever. So in some places it's just a lack of resources. The Irish media is under-resourced, and jobs are being shed for the last number of years. You see it in RTE, 200 to 300 jobs. You've seen it in Communicorp, you've seen it across some of the newspapers as well, and there's probably more of it to come, because it's not a financially rewarding career, and it's not something that's easily financed because people don't want to pay for their news.
Yeah, that is it in a nutshell. If it's not, and I mean, and we mean that as someone who sympathises, because we do a mom and pop job of a podcast, but even this costs money to produce. You gotta pay for hosting. You gotta pay for every time iTunes wants it, they want money. SoundCloud want money,
and your time as well.
Oh,
like you got whatever chat we have here, hour, an hour and a half. But then is also the chat we had earlier, so that's another while, and you probably have to go and edit this, and you have to upload it, you have to do all of that.
Yeah.
And people don't see the work that goes in behind. They just think, you're being soft on whatever minister. You don't see the pressure that's there in the day. And there are cases, and there are interviewers who are completely soft. And there's a part of that is as well that you have to keep up contacts. So what I'm finding anyway, and I'm still relatively new to being a Pol Cor, I'm only there 6 or 7 months, you just have to know when to pull and when to land your punches. There are going to be some stories where, maybe it's not that significant. You take not the full PR line, but you take the step back a little bit and go, okay, I'm going to facilitate you this time. Then when it comes to whatever, I expect the interview and expect the story. And it's kind of a weird balance that way of not pissing someone off to the point that they're no longer going to talk to you and you can't question or provide news anymore, but also not entirely becoming a PR machine.
Are you ever not on call?
No.
You can get a phone call 2:00 in the morning.
You could anytime. I mean, and if I could get my phone's on airplane mode at the moment to talk to you guys, it could be offing saying the government's collapsed and we're going for an election.
Touch wood.
But it depends. I'm always on call, and there's been so many times recently where you're in the pub on a Saturday afternoon and you get a text from someone in one of the Sunday papers saying, we've got a poll, we're releasing in an hour, here's the numbers. And I'd literally, in between the pint, type up the copy on the phone, step outside the pub, record it, send it in. You don't really get too much switch off time. So whenever I do, for example, last week the Dáil was off, I just took a week post-referendum, and as I said, completely switched everything off. Because
so do you have 3 months holidays coming up next?
I still have all the holiday days to take this year, because everything that I've taken I've built up in toil and built up in overtime, so it's a matter where you do build up all those days and hopefully take them in August when the Dáil is off.
Is it August? That's the quiet period.
Well, seemingly now this is my first summer going into in this new role, but it seems to be August is when everything kind of goes into its proper silly season. Do
the guys look after you? Is Gav Riley as nice as he pretends?
Gav Riley is a gentleman.
That's not what you said downstairs.
Shh! I thought I slipped you a fiver. Don't say that.
So what was the progression for you to go from, we know you went to DCU up the road here, from DCU to where you are now? How quick was that progression?
Quite quick. I have to say, it was a lot quicker than I thought it would be. So I graduated from DCU in 2015 and got into the best bit of the DCU course is there's a placement, there's an interplacement afterwards. So you get to spend 2 months somewhere to try and get a latch in and get a hook in, because that's the hardest bit about getting into media is actually getting in the door. And once you can, if you have the talent, you're able to show people, and hopefully cling on to a job somehow. So I got into RTE, I was in Morning Ireland for a couple of months, and when that finished up they said, look, we like you, but there's just nothing going at the moment, sorry. So I said, okay, fair enough, and went looking, and lucky enough I knew someone who was leaving a freelance role in News Talk, got on to the head of news there, John Keogh at the time, and managed to get in doing a few freelance shifts, reading the news and doing the network news service, 4 to midnight shifts. And I came out of college, went into the intro, and I think I worked something like 67 days straight just to break in between. So
you're kind of waiting for the guy in front of you to die. Really.
Kind of, yeah. And luckily that guy was your friend Richard Chambers.
Oh yeah.
He was the reporter in the newsroom for a long time, and
he said to call you Shomer Bjug.
Oh, that's God. I don't know how I feel about that now. Let's move on to it. So, yeah, I got lucky in that he had been in the news for a long time, and he moved to work then on the Pat Kenny show as a reporter, and that freed up a reporter role, and I was lucky enough to get in and get it after a few months being there. Did that for 2 years, did a bit more than 2 years. And then there was all the restructuring of the company that all went, and Gavin was put into the role as Pol Cor. He left for TV3. Chris Donoghue took that, and then he left a couple months later. Yeah. And then I was the last comment on it. So
basically, Martin, if you just hang around Marconi House for a few months, right? You'll be in front of a mic up there now with Ciara Kelly on the other side.
The new George.
That's it, yeah. Hang around long enough to, and eventually you'll climb the ladder by default.
Yeah, it's a nice progression all the same, because you are young for the position that you hold. I mean, compared to other political correspondents who are like 150.
Who you're wiping the dust off them as they go to lunch. No, I'm the youngest Pol Cor in the Dáil. I turned 25 this week.
Oh wow! So, you're actually half his age.
Oh wow, that's
you shut up.
Truth hurts, mate. Truth hurts. No, I just so the book is really upset with me
now. Are you? You're kind of glaring at me.
He leaves Balmount Hospital feeling 5'6". You're back to 5'1" again, mate.
Thanks, I hope you pull a fucking muscle.
So when's the election, Sean?
Oh, loads of people today were telling me September. There was this fever around the place today.
Oh, the word went out, did it?
It's going to be September. I still don't. I don't think it'll be this year. I made the prediction at the start of the year. I don't think it will be. And I think a lot weirdly is going to depend on what Michael D does. If there's a presidential election, I don't really see there being in general. But look, at the moment, everyone is on call. Everyone has the posters stacked up in the garages. It could come at any time. No one thought it would last this long. I think it'll last a little bit longer, possibly maybe March next year, February, March.
Any slip can take it down now. Just the wrong thing, or the right thing at the wrong time, and they're gone.
Yeah, you saw the Fanny Fit stuff. I mean, that came out of nowhere.
I think we have to be honest and admit that if there wasn't a referendum, they could probably have gone twice, 3 times in that period.
100%, yeah, between homelessness, between I&M and between Cervical Check, there were 3.
And phone calls to ministers.
And
there was quite a lot of stuff.
There was a lot of stuff, and I actually think Dennis Naughton and Owen Murphy are quite lucky.
Yeah,
they had the referendum at the time, because Sinn Féin were all gung-ho to put in their motion of no confidence in Owen Murphy, and it would have been quite hard, I think, for a lot of TDs. He's new enough in the job, fair enough, he's a year tomorrow. But it's still quite hard for a lot of TDs to get up and say, yeah, I think you're doing a good job in housing, because it's been such a...
368 houses built last year.
Well, we were just discussing
368. Let's put that in context. We mentioned Damien English downstairs, Martin, and he says 20,000 houses, and then he said 17,000 houses, but the figure is 368. I mean, how is that not a national outcry, disgrace?
Owen Murphy failing in his position. That is Owen Murphy fulfilling his position exactly as Fine Gael want him to do. He is doing exactly what he's meant to do.
Well, the important thing is around Rebuilding Ireland, and this was pointed out yesterday at Lorcan's housing seminar, that Rebuilding Ireland has a policy document, has its plan, and not once contained in it is the phrase, or any phrase that refers to a right to housing or a provision of adequate housing. It's not in there. It's purely driven on the basis of this is our infrastructure of how we're going to do it, and we know we're market dependent here. It's not working. I was blessed to sit down with the UN Special Rapporteur Leilani Farha. She was amazing, and she talked about the fact, and she told a few uncomfortable truths yesterday, where she said to the House Oireachtas that actually we're in breach of international law because we don't actually we don't have a provision for adequate housing. It's not this nonsense of everybody gets a free house. It's not this nonsense of doing that. It's actually adequate housing. That's the phrase that in international law. It's not give everybody a 3-bed semi in Dublin 9. And we're in breach. And unless we actually, we come out of the referendum on the 8th and we're all politically radicalised, or whatever way you want to put it, we do need to see some serious action. And I do think Sinn Féin should consider a motion of no confidence, because I think I think something needs to change in the public's mindset to know that this is, it's not good enough to say. The other statistic I got yesterday was from a professor in Tarragona, Sergio Ansari is his surname. He was absolutely brilliant, and he turned around and it wasn't his quote, but in his report he said, we know about Spain. We know we did 40% youth unemployment. We know about all of the economies in the tank. We mentioned that we were the poster child for austerity and how they weren't. In a population of 48 million people, there's 23,000 homeless people. We have a population of less than 4.8 million and we've over 10,000 people homeless. That doesn't make sense. You can't have Leo Varadkar tell the Dáil that in international context where, it's normal. This attempt to normalise homelessness, it's an outrage.
Yeah, but I think in large part they have normalised homelessness. They really have succeeded in normalising homelessness. We don't have a political movement, a strong political movement behind homelessness or housing, even social housing. And yet it's the biggest problem in the country by far. Hospitals are very close second, and Susan Mitchell has been writing about this recently, that the hospital waiting lists haven't dropped since the winter. So we're heading into once this summer is over, we're probably heading into the worst winter of hospital crisis we've ever seen. And yet Fine Gael have never been as high in the polls. There's a dichotomy. There's something going on there. There's some disconnect going on.
I wonder, though, that height in the polls, is it for lack of an alternative? Because people look at Fianna Fáil and they think, well, we tried you and it didn't go well. And there's not a huge amount that's changed there. And I think there is still, while Sinn Féin are clearly building, if you look at the polls, and Mary Lou's made a huge difference, there is still a mistrust there among some people. I don't think there's much among younger people. When you look at the poll figures, among younger people, it's stark. I mean, I think between 18 and 24 year olds, something like 44% support for Sinn Féin.
That's right.
And that trend is going on. So eventually we'll probably see in the next 10, 15 years a Sinn Féin government. And that's the one die, I suppose, that will be cast to say, give us something different, to give us a go. But after that, and if Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil stick to this pledge of we're not going to go in with Sinn Féin, it makes it much more difficult for them. But after that, who do you go to? Because it's smaller parties who are realistically never going to build up the support to get to that level where they can run a government. And that level of support for Fine Gael at the moment is that for a lot of people things are going quite well, and people recognise that it's not going well for some people, but when things are going well for you, you don't care as much.
I'm all right, Jack.
Yeah, exactly.
And you can no, that's not fair. Some of us do a standing order of €5 a month to help that child, and that's it.
And the chokra box out, and that's all well and good, but you might vote for someone else.
But that's kind of, Ireland's always been that kind of, I'm all right, Jack.
Yeah.
We have that mentality here. As long as I'm doing all that.
Yeah, but here's the issue then. Here's the kickback at that for the first time now, the homeless and housing crisis, we got to talk about it broader than just homelessness. The housing crisis is affecting middle class and people because little Jimmy can't move out until he's 29, and rents are too high and they can't, and the parents are looking and going, actually he moved out, now he wants to move back in. That sort of stuff is actually starting to impact.
In the long term, that on the economic long term, and when they look at it long term, they're saying, well, yeah, okay, we know now that this the locked out generation, but as the older generation dies. But this is true. This is completely true. As the older generation dies off, there's a transfer of wealth then to the locked out generation. So they're saying, okay, complain all you want now, but in 20 years' time, you're going to be the guys with the money.
And as long as you're the guys with the money, you're happy out, aren't you?
Yeah.
I think it's kind of like getting a sense of someone who's probably in that locked out generation, and most of my friends are.
I was going to say, you're right in that demographic.
Slap bang in the middle of it, and there's not like. It's kind of different for what I've seen. A lot of my friends who, because I mean, I've been working with people who are older than me for years, just out of virtue of the way that the industry is at the moment. A lot of them who are in their early 30s are buying now, and are buying quick, and are trying to do it before everything gets a little bit worse, if they can, and if they're in the position, great and well for them. But those who are kind of probably 27 and younger, and most of my friends, we're not within a whisker of being able to, even if the housing market was decent, there's not a hope we'd get a mortgage, would be even thinking about a mortgage at the moment. But the sense I get from a lot of people around my age is that we'll give them a few years to try and fix it. And they've said, okay, you're going to ramp it up, and in 4 or 5 years' time, when me and other people are looking at buying, there should be a stock of housing there. If all their plans go right, there should be a stock of housing there. And if there's still not at that stage...
Sean, the plan is to build 20,000 houses. As someone who helped pour petrol onto the flames of the Celtic Tiger, we were building 115,000 in 2007. Okay, so even the ambitious targets aren't ambitious. Like,
But they that obviously wasn't sustainable. I mean,
no, I
do know what
but
you
I'm
mean.
making the point of saying that, like, they're saying to you because a few months ago, Tom Parlin was arguing that there wasn't a shortage of workers and there wasn't a skills gap, and we just need the government to give us tax cuts and VAT cuts, and we'll get back doing it. No, but that's what he argued.
Yeah, no.
And now they're saying, well, actually, you know what, guys, we haven't got the workers, and we're in this situation. We're approaching full employment, so. Where's the imbalance? It doesn't make sense.
You're forgetting the valve. You're forgetting the valve. The valve is always there. And the valve is, as soon as the economy starts to tank, and we're getting a couple of sort of outlying warnings at the moment that the economy is not all that it should be, that it has overheated a little, that the property market's in for a bit of a soft landing. I've heard all these phrases before. If that happens, and if everything's cyclical, it's bound to crash again. I saw an interesting...
It's not, it doesn't have to be.
But it will.
But it will.
I know. It doesn't have to be, but it will.
Yeah.
And that's weirdly what I'm hearing from a lot of people, again, that are around my age. We'll wait for the next crash.
Yeah.
Save up the money now.
I saw an interesting tweet from a young woman, probably in around the same age yourself, child prodigy. And she said, if the economy does tank again, and they come after the locked out generation again, that they will burn the country to the ground. And that's what she said. We will burn the country to the ground.
I will be there with my pitchfork and my torch.
Well, you guys took the hit, and you took it fairly. I mean, if I was an OAP, and I'm not an OAP, Tony, if I was an OAP, I'd be looking, oh, that's great. There you go. Like, guys, you take 100 a week on your social welfare, and I'll live here high on the hog of my pension, and you guys are paying for it. Thanks very much. And now you guys get nothing.
But this is the weird bit about the young people have always been shit on. We've for generations. It's been a thing, and it particularly in the last 10 years. And people have taken it, and they've taken it, and they've taken it, and they have had to, because politicians know young people don't vote en masse until recently.
Yeah. Until
the marriage referendum and the abortion referendum.
Actually, and more globally in terms of Corbyn and things like that, where it actually because they keep saying, because they've said this and they've said it again, John. They've said it recently. Yeah, but they've all voted like that, but they won't vote in the general election. And I say, watch, they will.
I think it'd be really useful.
Here, the young people are. You're right. There was huge numbers going towards Sinn Féin. There are also a lot of numbers going to Fine Gael. Huge amount of numbers going to Fine Gael as well. Fianna Fáil kind of lost the younger vote somewhere around 1970. But Fine Gael, through good marketing, and it is, I will give them good marketing. They've put up Leo, they've put up Pascal, they've put up other people, and they look young now. If you look behind Fine Gael, they're still same curmudgeonly old farts that are behind Fianna Fáil. It's the same people, but they've put up a better vision.
Yeah, different wrapper around.
Yeah, it's a different wrapper.
It's and they look younger, they're in power, and the economy is doing well. And like when you are like, okay, maybe some of the people with my own age are a bit different because we're maybe thinking about politics a bit more and working politics, but for the vast majority of people in their 20s, you want to get out of college, you want to get a job, you want to have somewhere to have a roof over your head, and then start saving for a mortgage. And it's very, life is not that much more complicated. And again, go back to that attitude, if I'm doing okay, and I can get that bit, it's a bit shit for now, but sure, it was for everyone in their early 20s. Yeah. I'll deal with it and I'll get over it.
But it wasn't.
It wasn't as shitty
as it is.
It wasn't as bad as it is, but sure, we never knew any difference.
No, you didn't. And like when I look at it, you didn't. But like you knew real troubles in the 40s, Martin. You've seen that. But I came out and you walked from job to job, and you just kind of you did. And like when people say that the economy was overheating, God, it was really overheating. Like it was crazy stuff, but it was construction driven.
Now imagine it was mad crack. That's the only bit of it. I see all the...
hang on.
You didn't see the
I didn't see it. When people say, oh, we all partied, and people get all offended, go, no, we didn't. I always go, I did. Yeah, I did. Absolutely did.
The one that gets me is not even like the Celtic Tiger, like, all right, that was madness, whatever. But it's the older people again.
The Jagger generation.
Yourself, who say... guess what I bought? How much I bought my house for?
Yeah.
30 grand in Defoe.
Yeah, but back in,
A lot of Teslas about recently.
Yeah,
all I'm seeing is Teslas.
That's the new, buying a helicopter.
Yeah.
I do remember being younger. And I remember that it was permanent austerity. Permanent. All the time. Up until the Celtic Tiger started. All that 90s period, the 80s period, it was just grind.
Took off in 95.
Yeah, I would have said closer to 98 before anybody really felt that there was a difference going on, or that there was something different going on. And I disagree with Tony, with the We All Party. Everybody I knew worked their arse off. They did overtime.
I'm not saying, I just said I did.
Yeah, the bankers set were off prostitutes in Iceland, but everybody else was working. They were working and working really hard. And that's what everybody forgets, is nobody got anything for nothing. They had to work for what they got. There was guys doing 60, 100 hours a week, really, really working. Now if you do 60, 100 hours a week, you still can't make the rent. And that's the difference.
But it's also almost expected. You do 60 hours a week as a journalist and they're like, only 60.
Yeah.
And it's nearly, particularly in our industry, I mean, people work their arses off for very little in compensation.
Unionize.
Well, yeah, that's the other side of it. It's not a common thing in journalism to unionize. And there isn't that unite because we're almost all sole traders on our own reputation. We are, it comes that way and then you don't, but that is a big problem.
Well, it's a drive to the bottom within journalism at the moment. Everybody's afraid to unionize. They're all on precarious, I'm not saying all, but a lot of them are on precarious contracts, precarious employment. They have to write a particular way to make sure that they can make a living out of it. Not a lot of them can write that long form stuff that they want to write. They have to write that 300-word clickbait piece, which is just crap. And they much prefer to be doing something that they actually learned in college.
But again, some of that is our responsibility as people who consume media, that we want, paywall. What do you mean paywall?
Yeah.
If you want to read quality content, and you got to also keep going back to it, Ireland's only a small country, very hard to, if you've only got, a small audience, a small market, you need to be able to garner some sort of financial structure, and you're not going to make that on clicking through, people trying to sell you Bulgarian ski homes or whatever it is.
And it's a weird one where I think people are actually getting annoyed at, you go onto this website and you want to read the article and it's like a fifth of the page is the article, and you got an ad for this and an ad for that and all targeted on whatever you watched on Facebook 10 years ago. And that's quite annoying. But then in a more positive light, I think there has been a movement towards figuring out how to monetize it. I think people are slightly more okay with paying for it. You look at the likes of the Business Post, you look at the New Times of Ireland, who are
Times.ie,
who are getting more subscriptions. And I think if you want to talk about podcasts, Second Captains, it's a small amount, what is it, €5 a month or something?
€5 a month, and it's well worth it.
That's well worth it, but it builds a bit of money into it, and then eventually what happens is with all things, it'll get more expensive as people get more accustomed to it.
I saw Eamon Dunphy got a sponsor today.
Oh, wow.
And I thought that was hilarious. He's sponsored now by Tesco. And, Martin's looking at me like I have 10 heads, but Eamon is now sponsored by Tesco. And I guarantee you, if he had any sense, he'd turn around and say thank you to John Waters.
Yeah.
Because, most people...
It is quite a good podcast, but it just blew it off the scale.
It literally, it had never been in the top of the charts, and all of a sudden, Eamon, you're a bollocks. Go talk to Una Mullally. And people went, oh, this is deadly.
Like, when your podcast is getting played on traditional radio, you've done something right.
Yes,
Even if it is
because a lot of them don't want to even acknowledge that it exists.
I think it's the echoes that stop.
We have to get Leo Varadkar in here calling me a bollocks. We just...
I'm sure you do it. I don't know what you come in to do.
Yeah.
Fox people do.
Just catch him winding down the window of the car and shouting at you.
Yeah. Go to the gym in the morning instead of setting.
Yeah.
So tell us, what's your prediction for elections? Who are you looking at? What combinations are we looking at? You're in there. You're in the know. Who's talking to who? Who's sidling up to who?
Everyone's talking to everybody. Yeah, it's the nature of politics. They'll all say, and Fine Gael and Fianna Fáil will say, we're not going to go in with Sinn Féin and we're not going to go in with each other, but everyone will talk to everybody. It's a really weird position we're in, whereby Fine Gael are more popular now, but they're still not popular enough to go on their own. And Fianna Fáil are not getting any traction at all. They've been static at around 25% now for more than a year. They're not getting any sort of message. I don't think Micheál Martin was quite brave to come out with his yes at the time, obviously in the context of where that went in the abortion referendum. It was fairly obvious and the right decision for him.
But it probably saved his party another 5 or 6%.
It probably did, yeah. And but the split there has really caused him problems again that have kind of been papered over by the level of the results, but are still very real. And there's a lot of people who won't go towards Fianna Fáil because of that. So, I mean, Sinn Féin are kind of the future, it seems to be at the moment.
It's kind of real secondary school, isn't it? It's real, no, I'm not going out with him. No,
Yeah.
I'm not going out with him.
And then, like, he asks you out and you go, oh, yeah. Well,
Where'd you get the hickey?
Did you see the poor old the housing seminar yesterday? The hashtag was make the shift. And we were doing the interview up on Harcourt Street, and all I could think of was, you're on Harcourt Street, you'll get the shift. Don't worry about it. Don't say it, Tony, don't say it. You'll be thrown out of the building.
Too obvious.
Yeah.
Open goal.
So is there anybody there in Leinster House who's been really nice to you and shown you the ropes, or have you had to fight it all yourself and learn the whole lot?
No, I have to say the group of Pol Cor, the gallery, the press gallery there, have actually been really good. And I had a different impression of them from outside.
You had the Vincent Brown impression?
I don't know, I kind of had more impression that they were a bit of a clique. And
that would be the Vincent Brown impression.
Well, yeah. Well, Vincent just doesn't care. He's going to go off to Etna and lead you through Gorse Hill in a mad charge, you know, like, but they, and, you know, they probably are a bit cliquey because they, again, like working in any office, you work with the same people every day and all of the journalists are on the kind of same floor in the offices there. But I have to say, like, I shared office there with Ireland, the Irish Times. She was unbelievably brilliant. She kind of started as a political correspondent around the same age I did. Yeah. Back when she started, and the likes of Gavin was fantastic. Chris Donoghue, actually, I know he's moved out of journalism now, but even my first day down there, you know, kind of just showed me the ropes and kind of...
Must be nice to have all these old people helping you.
Well, you know, to be fair, they're
all in their 30s.
They're all, you know, ancient homeowners.
Walking around like
hang on, I'm going to take issue with that. Gavin is not a homeowner. He lives in Meath.
Well, yeah, okay. Fair. Some of them are.
Meath.
It's actually, a lot of the press gallery are quite young. They're, you know, in early 30s, late 20s. And I don't know, is that a kind of a conflict of the profession that you can only last so long in that place?
Well, there's an argument for, instead of leaving them in situ for years on end, to actually rotate them in and rotate them out.
They should be doing that with the politicians.
They stay fresh.
They stay fresh, yeah. And like, it's a weird one to argue because obviously you have to build up your contacts, and you're, you know, that's probably one of the bits that I found hardest to do, and that I knew quite a lot of politicians before going in, and you'd be friendly with them and they do a soundbite with you or whatever, but to get to the point of where someone will leak something to you or someone will give you that, tell you what's really going on. You know, that's the level you have to build to trust.
Like a source closest to the minister is the minister.
Yeah. Exactly, that kind of stuff. Yeah.
Where's Kevin Doyle?
We know this too well.
Yeah, I tell you, you know your stuff. You interviewed enough people. But yeah, that kind of stuff, you know, that's where you build up your sources, and that just takes time, unfortunately. Which
okay,
is
last question for you. Where do you see yourself in 5 years? Now that you are where you are.
New Zealand, I'd imagine. After the next crash.
This is the podcast interview. Where do you see yourself in 5 years?
Time. Leading the charge of young people burning down the country after we've been screwed again, I suppose.
I think so.
I 5 years' time, I don't really know. I don't think I'll still be in this job in 5 years. I don't have any intention of staying in it for that long. But you never know what could happen, you know, and go along the way.
Shift to TV?
I don't know. I like doing telly a bit. I would like to I've started doing a bit of presenting on News Talk, and that's kind of where I would see myself going long term. I don't know if that'll happen in 5 years. It's a pretty cutthroat kind of a business. So
there's a lot of old people in there, though. A lot of old people.
There's also only a certain amount of jobs.
Yates hasn't got much left in him, you know.
Well, I think to be fair to that man, like, whatever about doing an evening show.
No, let's not be fair.
I think, like, let's be fair about it, because he goes, and this is a man who's absolutely paralysing back pain most of the day, and comes in, does, like, you walk into the office and you see Ivan lying down on the floor to read the papers, because that's the only way he could do it at the back. He's lying down there trying to read. But he comes in, does his 3 hour show on Newstalk, bolts it out to TV3, and is still working at 12 at night, and then is getting up again to do it the next day. And he's not a young man either, you know.
No,
so
he's not.
I have to.
He's older than me.
Well, that's saying something. So you have to respect that level of work you put in.
But the only problem is you gotta remember, even if you're trying to do a slot, if you're on News Talk or any of the various channels that you represent, you wanted to get a slot. What are you going to do? Richard Chambers fills in for everything. You know, it's like literally, you know, he's going to change his name to Richard filling in for. No,
well, it's a hard one, and it, like, you know, there's the likes of Richard and Andrea Gilligan and Kieran Cuddihy, and I hope in a couple of years myself as well, who are filling in there. But it's such a fickle business that you have to stay hoping and believing that opportunity will come along.
Next stop is a Sunday morning, 9 to 10 slot.
Well, that's.
I'm not knocking it. I'm just saying that's the progression.
No, but that is because you move up as other people move on or move into different roles. And as a weekend presenter gets a full-time gig, and you get a weekend gig, and then you hope. But
how does it feel to be an aspirational figure for younger people?
Who, me?
Yeah, you're 25. You've in journalism, you have a big job at 25. It's a big job. It is a big. Stuff you do goes across a lot of places. So you are for other upcoming young journalists. You have to be aspirational.
I just kind of feel like I'm lucky. I was right place, right time a lot of the time.
That's the right answer. That's the right answer. That is the right answer.
But it was for me. It was as I was leaving RTE, there happened to be a freelance job in Newstalk, and then Richard happened to move on at the right time that I was ready to make a step up. And then Gavin and Chris, and I actually even think I wanted the job when Gavin initially left, and I didn't get it, and Chris Donoghue got it. And I don't think I was ready for it then. And even though it was only, whatever it was, 3 or 4 months, that gap did me the world of good, because I just got my head around things a bit more. And then it came up again, and I was lucky enough to get it. So timing, and it doesn't work out for everybody with time. So I've been unbelievably lucky.
Right time, right place, but also the right skills.
And you worked.
We do think as for 25 to have, and it is a big job at 25. I think well done, very well done.
I just need to not burn out before 27.
Or you'll end up looking like him.
You're actually 25 yourself. It's just been a long.
I get away with a couple of years knocked off.
No, Sean, look, really do appreciate you coming in and having the chat, and it's nice to have a general broad chat about it, because we often hear on the radio shows, and we're voracious consumers of media here, but like, you know, you get 6 minutes and you don't get to have to get a real part of it. So it's nice to get that insight, and I think people will actually enjoy it, because despite Martin's best, you know, you're a good guy.
He's portrayed me in the accurate light.
Thanks again for coming on.
Thanks for guys. Thanks for having me.
Cheers, folks. Thanks for listening. Hit subscribe, leave us a review, tell your friends. We have no other budget. We depend on you. Please do something. At least grab someone's phone and pretend and hit subscribe. And don't even tell them about it. Thanks. Bye-bye.